Have you ever had it happen that when you receive your craft supplies, you open the box and just dive right in, forget about all the household chores you have to do, cooking dinner and all of those things, and then just emerge 2 days later with a whole stack of cards ready to go? Well, that just happened to me. I received the Christmas Village release, which is my second release ever, on Monday night, and Wednesday night all of a sudden came around and I had made 15 cards. And so we're gonna dive in and create 4 of my favorite cards that I created throughout this week, and I can't wait to show them to you. But I also wanted to mention that I have a free inspiration guide for the Christmas Village stamp set. This includes 12 card ideas with photos, step-by-step instructions, and everything you need to get started with the collection, because you all know that I'm all about buying what you love, but then also using it. So I am giving you a whole bunch of ideas on how you can get started with the Christmas Village collection.
All right, so I'm going to show you 4 cards, as I said, and we're going to start off with a navy piece of cardstock here for our card base, getting that folded up 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. This is a card that has a lot of moving pieces to it, but it's really worth doing. Next up, I grabbed a nesting die, one small, one larger, and I evenly spaced them apart and held them together with some tape to keep that even spacing. I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine with gold cardstock, which is one of my favorite things to use for the holidays. All right, next up is the Snowstorm hot foil and die set. This is a 1-piece hot foil plate that also comes with a die to cut all 4 snowflakes out at once. But what I love about this set too is it includes 4 snowflakes that are very similar in a die cut form, so that if you want a hot foil, you can hot foil. If you want a die cut, you can die cut. And if you want a hot foil and die cut, you can do both. And mixing and matching them on this card is just magic. Here you can get a quick look at the die cuts as well, so grabbing all 4 of those dies, because you might as well cut them all at the same time and just keep them for leftovers later if you don't use all of the die cuts. So throwing those through the die cutting machine now, and then I'm done creating the majority of the elements for this card so that I can get the sentiment right or the spacing right for the sentiment rather. So I laid out my entire collage of mixed die cuts, hot foil die cuts, and my frame, just so I have an idea of where to place this and bright sentiment.
Just dropping a quick reminder that if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so. Getting so close to the 100,000, and I'd love your help getting there.
I'm also going to need the Merry, so for Merry and Bright. This is another wonderful holiday sentiment set that comes with both a stamp and a die, all which function on their own. The stamp can function by itself, the die can function by itself, or you can mix and match them. So you get tons of different looks. There's different sizes available and different expressions that you can make by mix and matching the sentiments. I always find sentiments like this really handy. Instead of just having, the standard Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, I can mix and match things. So I die cut the Merry out of gold cardstock. All right, now that everything is stamped down using some embossing ink, I'm just covering it with a bit of gold embossing powder and melting that embossing powder until it is shiny. Next up is just simply gluing all of the elements together, how we had them placed out before we did all the stamping and the sentiments. First adding the frame to the card. Then moving on and adding our hot foiled snowflakes here, which are looking so pretty on that navy cardstock. I'm going to add 2 of them here, not in a straight line. I am keeping them at a bit of a diagonal from each other. Then come the die cuts, which I will slip underneath. So these aren't using the foam tape like the foiled elements do, so that I have a little bit of depth and texture in the card. And lastly, you can see here that I've taken 2 Merry die cuts, one in navy and one in gold. I've off-centered them, and then I am going to add it to the card. All right, so we're finishing things up here with a couple of Nouveau drops. This is a really pale gold. I think it's actually called pale gold. I wish I used the other gold, but it looked fine in the end as well. And I'm just putting things in clusters of 3. So you can see the bottom triangle, then I have, the triangle up here, and then I have, kind of 2 random ones, but overall, I try to keep things sort of in a triangle shape and to fill up any blank spots. So there is card inspiration number 1. This would work great in an assembly line if you wanted to make a few of them, and they're absolutely gorgeous. But if you are going to create bulk cards, this one is much easier and much better It's very easy to create and there's very few elements. So going in here, I'm going to go ahead and add a piece of 4 by 5¼ inch gold cardstock. I'm attaching it to a card base that is a standard A2 size, 4¼ by 5½. And then I'm going to go ahead and layer one more piece of this green cardstock. So this is going to be 1/4 inch smaller than the gold cardstock, which makes it 3 3/4 by 5 inches. For those of you that like to layer cardstock, this is a very classic look, is adding the card base and then the same color of that base on top, but having something in between like a gold or a black. Just makes everything stand out. It makes it look like a frame. It makes it look very complete, I find. Next up, I'm going to add this snowflake die, which is also part of the collection. Comes with one snowflake that you can hot foil, one snowflake that you can die cut, and you can use the die cut to cut out the hot foiled snowflake if you like. This is a very, very pretty die. I absolutely love snowflakes and everything with snowflakes. I'm also very clever at naming my products. Like this is called snowflake die. You know, what's a girl to do? And since in the last card we did some heat embossing, I didn't find the need to show the steps again. Stamp, of course, in your embossing ink, add your gold powder, and then melt the embossing powder, and you have the beautiful Merry and Bright stamped this time, rather than combining the stamp and the die together. You can also do this, and like I said, you can mix and match the different words and sentiments. So overall, very few steps for this card, aside from just cutting down some cardstock, dyeing the snowflake, and adding a sentiment. It's very easy to recreate, but it's very elegant, I find. I want to create more of these. Now, when it comes to holiday card making, I tend to use a lot of metallics, gold, silver, bronze, those kinds of colors. I think they just look classic and elegant, but I can never really find a good bronze cardstock or a copper color. So what I did was add some embossing ink to a piece of scrap cardstock, and I'm gonna add some copper embossing powder, which is one of my favorite embossing powders. This one's from Ranger, and I'm just gonna create my own cardstock. It works the same as normal heat embossing. You just literally apply the ink though directly to your cardstock and then melt the powder. You can also do multiple layers, just I would suggest letting it cool quickly in between, 30 seconds to a minute. Add more of the embossing ink on top, add more powder, and you'll get an even thicker, smoother look. But it will take a little bit longer to, I guess you could say, dry so it doesn't come off on your fingers. So like I said, about a half a minute, and you'll be all good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and add 4 snowflakes. These are the snowflakes we used before for the gold elements of the navy card. And I'm gonna run this through my die cutting machine. Now this here isn't a part of the collection, but I think a lot of us own something like this. It's just a snow embossing folder. You don't have to use an embossing folder. This is just an extra fun step that I added, but I think it does add an added elegance. But I am going to have my cardstock hanging out so that it doesn't actually emboss elements on the entire card. I'm leaving the bottom free for other elements that I want to add. Now those elements that I want to add are Christmas houses. This is from the Christmas Village collection. The collection is my way of taking you to the European Christmas markets with lots of cool architecture and really neat buildings that you can add to your cards. And I designed it so that it's very detailed so that you don't have to color. You can just simply stamp it or emboss it. But if you do want to color, then you have a lot of really cool elements. So I'm going to place my paper here in the center, and I'm going to heat emboss 3 of these houses using the same copper embossing powder that I used to make those snowflakes earlier, because they're going to make an appearance again on this card. This is another fun way that you can incorporate the village stamps and things into a very neutral, modern, and sleek sort of card. I'm going to go ahead and grab the same color card base and one of those snowflake elements that we already created. I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of the panel that we embossed with the snow embossing folder. I'm adding it to the card base, and then once again, I'm adding the snowflake here onto the card base itself. And here's a final look at that card. I think this color palette I'm going to be using more often in the future. For the next card, we're going to cut down a piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 inches by 1.5 inches. And you'll see off to the left there, I already have a piece of light gray cardstock that is cut at 1 3/4 inches by 4 1/4 inches, so that I have a 1/2 inch border a 1/4 inch border on the top and bottom of the pattern paper so that I could do a little bit of layering. I'm going to grab my card panel here, which is 4 1/4 by 5.5, and I'm going to use the gray piece here to kind of get an idea as to where I'm going to place my house stamps on my card. After I've laid down all 3 house stamps, I'm going to stamp them with some Twilight ink, which is a pretty good match to the gray cardstock that I'm using. If you're really picky and you want it to be the exact same color, you can take your ink pad and swipe it across a white piece of cardstock and you'll have the same colored cardstock as you will your stamp. But I don't mind if it's slightly lighter or darker in this case. I'm going to now glue down the gray panel here, and this one here, this card, I think out of all of them is probably one of the easiest ones to do if you're going to create in bulk for your holiday card making. It's just simply a little bit of cutting cardstock and stamping once with the 3 houses, a die cut for the sentiment, and you're pretty much good to go. So I'm layering the patterned paper on top here, and I have a nice neutral palette. And lastly, I'm going to grab the holiday die cut here. This is from the holiday sentiment set, and I die cut that in some red cardstock, and I'm going to put cheer also there using the die cut to help me with the placement of my stamp. And I'm also stamping it in Twilight, but I'm going to stamp it about 2 or 3 times just to get it a little bit darker than the houses here so that it stands out against the holiday and you can really see it well. Now simply attaching the holiday stamp to the card, and the card is all finished. So here's a final look at all the cards that we created today. I'm super proud of every one of them. It's so surreal to see the products that you thought of in your head come to life, and I've had an absolute blast creating with the Christmas Village line.
Now, if you enjoyed these quick and easy ideas on how to make gorgeous Christmas cards with the Christmas Village collection, then come meet me over here in this video. I want to show you my first product line ever called Sunflower Smiles. If you haven't checked it out yet, there's amazing card ideas in there as well that you can adapt to your own stash, or of course, if you want to combine the Christmas Village and the Sunflower Smiles bundle in your order, you can do so as well. I'll see you over there.